What happens when Hollywood royalty meets late-night television and it all goes spectacularly wrong? In just 37 seconds, one comment would ignite a firestorm that would end with an empty chair and a stunned studio audience. Seth Meyers had seen it all. Years behind the desk of his late-night show had given him the kind of calm confidence that comes from interviewing everyone from presidents to pop stars. He knew how to handle difficult guests, how to steer conversations back on track, and how to make even the most awkward moments feel light. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on this particular evening. The audience applauded as Meghan walked onto the set. She was wearing an elegant cream-colored suit, her hair perfectly styled, her smile practiced and precise. Seth stood to greet her, extending his hand with genuine warmth. She took it briefly, barely making eye contact before settling into the guest chair with an air of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "Welcome to the show," Seth said, returning to his seat. "It's great to have you here." "Thank you for having me," Meghan replied, though her tone suggested she was doing him the favor. The band finished their musical cue, and the audience settled into their seats. Seth glanced down at his notes, then back up with that trademark smile that had endeared him to millions of viewers. "So, you've been working on some really interesting projects lately," Seth began. "I'd love to hear about what you've been up to." Meghan shifted in her chair, crossing her legs deliberately. "Well, Seth, I've been focusing on things that actually matter. Things that make a real difference in the world. Not just, the kind of surface-level entertainment that most people are satisfied with." There was a slight pause. Seth's smile held, but something flickered in his eyes. The audience remained quiet, sensing a shift in energy. "Right," Seth said, carefully. "Well, entertainment can be meaningful too. I like to think we try to do that here, mixing humor with important conversations." Meghan let out a small laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Sure, if you think jokes about politicians and celebrity impressions count as important conversations." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the audience. Seth leaned back slightly, his professional armor fully engaged now. "I mean, we also have serious segments," he said, keeping his tone light. "We've covered everything from climate change to social justice issues. Comedy can be a great way to engage people with topics they might otherwise avoid." "Can it, though?" Meghan asked, tilting her head. "Or does it just trivialize everything, turn real suffering into punchlines for people to laugh at between commercial breaks?" The studio had gone very quiet now. Even the crew members behind the cameras seemed to freeze in place. Seth cleared his throat. "I think there's a difference between making light of serious issues and using humor as a tool to discuss them," he said. "But I respect that you see it differently. Let's talk about your new initiative. You've been working with several organizations too." "You know what I find interesting, Seth?" Meghan interrupted, leaning forward. "You sit here night after night, in your expensive suit, behind this desk, acting like you're somehow better than everyone else, like you have all the answers." Seth blinked. I don't think I act that way at all. I'm just a comedian trying to." "Trying to what?" Meghan cut in again. "Trying to be relevant? Trying to matter? Because from where I'm sitting, this whole thing," she gestured around the studio, "is just a platform for your ego." The audience was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. Seth's expression had shifted from friendly host to something harder, more guarded. But he kept his composure. "Meghan, I'm not sure where this is coming from," he said quietly. "Did I say something to offend you? Because if I did, that wasn't my intention." "Oh, here we go," Meghan said, rolling her eyes. "The fake apology. The 'I didn't mean it' defense. Do you know how patronizing that is?" "I'm trying to understand what's happening here," Seth replied, and there was steel in his voice now. "I invited you on my show to have a conversation, to let you talk about your work, but you've spent the last few minutes attacking me and what we do here." "Attacking you?" Meghan's voice rose. "I'm simply telling the truth, something you wouldn't know anything about. Clearly, you and everyone else in this industry just put on these fake smiles and pretend everything is wonderful when the world is falling apart." Seth took a breath, visibly steadying himself. "The world has serious problems, absolutely. But I don't think being hostile to people who are trying, in their own way, to make things a little better, or at least a little more bearable, is the answer." "There it is," Meghan said sharply. "The condescension. You think you're so clever with your words, don't you? So quick with the comeback. Is that what they teach you in comedy school? How to dismiss people who actually have something real to say? Comedy school isn't really a Seth started, but Meghan was on a roll now. Do you know what it's like to actually struggle, Seth? To actually sacrifice something? Or have you just coasted through life on privilege and lucky breaks? The audience let out a collective gasp. Seth's jaw tightened. His hands, which had been gesturing naturally throughout the conversation, now gripped the edge of his desk. I think everyone has their own struggles, he said, his voice controlled but firm. And I don't think it's fair or productive to assume you know someone's life story or what they've been through. Oh, please, Meghan scoffed. Spare me the false modesty. You went to a prestigious school, you got handed opportunities, I worked very hard to get where I am, Seth interrupted, and now there was real edge in his voice. Just like most people in this building, work hard every single day. And I don't appreciate you coming onto my show and disrespecting them or me. Disrespecting? Meghan's voice went up an octave. You want to talk about disrespect? What about the disrespect of inviting someone on your show and then trying to make them look bad? I haven't tried to make you look bad, Seth said, and his patience was clearly wearing thin. You're doing that entirely on your own. The audience made a collective sound, a mix of shock and something like approval. Meghan's face flushed. Excuse me? She said coldly. I've been nothing but respectful to you since you walked out here, Seth continued. I've tried to steer this conversation toward your work, toward productive topics, but you've been hostile from the moment you sat down. And honestly, I'm not sure why you even agreed to come on the show. If you have such contempt for what we do, maybe I wanted to expose you, Meghan shot back. Maybe I wanted people to see what you're really like behind all the jokes and the charm. And what am I really like? Seth asked, spreading his hands. Please, enlighten everyone. You're fake, Meghan said, pointing at him. You're just like all the rest of them, pretending to care about issues, pretending to be one of the good guys, when really you're just another cog in the machine, keeping people distracted while everything burns. Seth stared at her for a long moment. The camera caught every detail of his expression, the disappointment, the frustration, the careful control. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said finally, but I can't let you sit here and attack me, my team, and our show without pushback. We work hard to create something entertaining and, yes, sometimes meaningful. We're not perfect, but we're trying. And if that's not good enough for you, then maybe this isn't the right place for you to be. Are you asking me to leave? Meghan asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. I'm saying that if you can't have a civil conversation, then yes, maybe it would be better if we ended this interview, Seth replied calmly. Unbelievable, Meghan muttered, shaking her head. This is exactly what I expected. The minute someone challenges you, the minute someone doesn't play along with your little game, you want them gone. That's not what's happening here, and you know it, Seth said. You came out here with an agenda. You wanted to pick a fight. And I've tried, really tried, to keep things professional. But there's only so much hostility I'm going to sit here and take. Hostility? Meghan laughed, but it was a harsh sound. You think this is hostility? This is honesty. This is someone finally having the courage to say what everyone else is thinking. I don't think everyone is thinking that, Seth countered. In fact, I think most people are sitting here wondering why you're being so unnecessarily cruel to someone who's done nothing to you. Done nothing? Meghan's voice was getting louder now. You represent everything that's wrong with this industry. The self-satisfaction, the complacency, the complete disconnect from reality. And you represent what exactly? Seth asked, and there was a quiet intensity to the question. Because from where I'm sitting, you walked onto my show, refused to engage in good faith, insulted me and my team repeatedly, and now you're acting like you're some kind of truth teller when really you're just being mean. The word hung in the air. Mean. Simple, direct, undeniable. Meghan's mouth opened and closed. I am not being mean. I'm being honest. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Seth said. You can be honest without being cruel. You can disagree without being disrespectful. And you can make your point without making personal attacks. This is ridiculous, Meghan said, standing up abruptly. The sudden movement made her microphone pack shift, creating a brief burst of feedback through the speakers. If you want to leave, that's your choice, Seth said, remaining seated. But I want to be clear for everyone watching. I invited you here in good faith. I wanted to have a real conversation. What happened instead is on you, not me. Meghan yanked at her lapel microphone, fumbling with the wire. I don't need to sit here and listen to this. I don't need to be lectured by someone who thinks he's so much better than everyone else. "I've never said I'm better than anyone," Seth replied, his voice steady. "But I do know how to treat people with basic respect, which is apparently more than you can say." "You know what your problem is, Seth?" Meghan said, finally getting the microphone off and tossing it onto the chair. "You're so used to everyone kissing up to you, telling you how great you are, that you can't handle it when someone sees through the act." "There's no act," Seth said simply. "This is who I am. I'm a comedian who hosts a talk show. I try to be kind to my guests, I try to make people laugh, and I try to create something that brings a little joy into people's lives. If that's not important enough for you, if that's somehow offensive to you, then I genuinely don't know what to tell you." "Of course you don't," Meghan said bitterly, "because you're so wrapped up in your own bubble that you can't see anything else." A producer appeared at the edge of the stage, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Seth held up a hand, signaling that he had it under control. "I think we're done here," Seth said, not unkindly, just matter of fact. "Thank you for coming, Meghan. I'm sorry, this didn't go the way either of us probably hoped." "Save it," Meghan snapped. She turned to walk off stage, then paused and turned back. "You know what? Your show is boring, your jokes are predictable, and you're nowhere near as smart as you think you are." The audience gasped again. Seth just nodded slowly. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll take that on board. Have a good evening." Meghan stared at him for a moment longer, perhaps expecting him to fire back with something cutting. But Seth just sat there, calm and composed, waiting for her to leave. The lack of reaction seemed to infuriate her more than any comeback could have. "This is why nobody watches late night anymore," she said as a parting shot, then turned on her heel and strode off stage, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The second she disappeared into the wings, the studio fell into a strange, suspended silence. Seth sat at his desk, looking down at his cards, clearly processing what had just happened. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, to laugh, to gasp, or to simply sit in shocked silence. They chose silence. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 seconds, Seth looked up at the camera. His expression was a mixture of bewilderment and carefully controlled frustration. "Well," he said finally, and a small, genuine laugh escaped him. It wasn't a mean laugh or a triumphant laugh. It was the laugh of someone who genuinely could not believe what had just occurred. That was something. The audience, released from their frozen state by his words, erupted into applause. Not polite applause, but genuine, supportive applause. They were on his side, and it was clear. Seth held up his hands. I really don't know what happened there. I promise you, that's not how we planned for this interview to go." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "I mean, we had questions prepared about her charity work, her new projects. We were going to do a fun bit about her favorite books. Instead, we got, well, you all saw what we got. More applause, mixed with some sympathetic laughter." "Look," Seth continued, his voice more serious now, "I don't want to pile on. Clearly something was going on that I wasn't aware of. Maybe she's having a bad day. Maybe there's some history I don't know about. But I want to say this. Everyone who works on this show, from the writers to the crew to the band to the interns, they all work incredibly hard. And they're all good people who care about making something worthwhile. So when someone comes out here and dismisses all of that, dismisses all of them, yeah, I'm going to push back on that." The audience applauded again, louder this time. "But here's the thing," Seth said, leaning forward. "We're not going to let one bad interview ruin our night. We've got a great show planned. We've got another guest coming up who I promise will actually want to be here." He smiled, and the tension in the room began to dissipate. "We're going to take a quick break, reset, and come back, because that's what we do. We keep going." As they cut to commercial, the audience was buzzing with conversation. Camera operators and stage managers huddled in small groups, replaying what they'd just witnessed. The band members looked at each other with wide eyes and disbelieving expressions. Backstage, according to crew members who were there, Meghan was engaged in a heated conversation with her publicist. Her voice carried through the hallways, though the words were indistinct. Several staff members reported that she seemed to be blaming the show for somehow setting her up, insisting that Seth had been antagonistic from the start. Anyone who had actually watched the interview knew this was not true. Back on stage, Seth was getting touch-ups from makeup during the commercial break. His producer came over, putting a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" the producer asked quietly. Seth nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay. That was just, wow, that was intense. "You handled it perfectly," the producer said. "You were professional the whole time. You gave her every opportunity to course correct." "I just don't understand where it came from," Seth said, shaking his head. "We sent her team all the questions. In advance. Everything was approved. She knew exactly what we were going to talk about." "Some people just want to make a scene," the producer offered. "Some people think controversy equals relevance." "Maybe," Seth said, "but man, what a waste. We could have had a great conversation." When the show came back from commercial, Seth had his composure fully restored. He launched into his next segment with the same energy and enthusiasm he always brought, as if the previous incident had never happened. It was a masterclass in professionalism and not letting one negative experience derail an entire evening. His next guest, a comedian promoting a new special, came out and immediately addressed the elephant in the room. "So, that was wild," the comedian said as they sat down. Seth laughed, a real laugh this time. "It really was. But you know what? We're moving on. Tell me about your special." And they did move on. The rest of the show went smoothly, filled with genuine laughter and good conversation. It was a stark contrast to what had happened earlier, a reminder of what the show was supposed to be. But the incident with Meghan remained the talk of the evening. Audience members filed out of the studio still discussing it, still trying to process what they'd witnessed. Many of them would later post about it on social media, their accounts varying slightly in details but all agreeing on the core facts. Meghan had been hostile from the start, Seth had remained professional throughout, and her departure had been dramatic and entirely of her own making. The crew members who had worked on the show for years said they'd never seen anything quite like it. Sure, there had been awkward interviews before. There had been guests who were difficult or uncomfortable or who didn't quite click with Seth's humor. But this was different. This was someone who had seemingly come onto the show with the specific intention of creating conflict. Seth, for his part, tried to move past it quickly. In the days that followed, he would occasionally reference the incident in his monologue, but always briefly and without real malice. His approach seemed to be that the less attention he gave it, the faster it would fade from public consciousness. What stayed with people, though, wasn't just the drama of the confrontation. It was Seth's response to it, the way he had remained calm under attack, the way he had defended his team without being cruel himself, the way he had tried, repeatedly, to redirect the conversation to something productive before finally accepting that it wasn't going to happen. You could tell he really didn't want it to go that way, one audience member said afterward. He gave her so many chances to just, be normal, to have a regular conversation, and she just kept escalating. Another audience member noted how the camera had captured Seth's micro-expressions throughout the exchange. You could see him trying to figure out what was happening, trying to fix it. And then you could see the moment he realized he couldn't fix it, that this was just going to be what it was going to be. What struck many people was the fundamental unfairness of it all. Seth had done everything right. He'd been welcoming, he'd prepared thoughtful questions, he'd tried to be gracious even in the face of hostility. And yet he'd been accused of being fake, condescending, and out of touch. It was a reminder that sometimes, no matter how professionally you conduct yourself, some people will find fault. The incident also highlighted something about the nature of talk shows and live television. These were unpredictable environments where things could go wrong in an instant. The skill of a good host wasn't just in conducting smooth interviews, but in navigating the rough ones without losing composure. Seth had passed that test. He hadn't stooped to Meghan's level. He hadn't lost his temper or said something he would later regret. He had been firm when necessary, defending himself and his team, but never cruel. He had, in essence, been exactly what a good host should be. The empty chair that Meghan left behind became, in a way, symbolic. It represented an opportunity squandered, a conversation that could have been meaningful but instead became a cautionary tale. It represented the difference between someone who understood what it meant to be a good guest and someone who saw a talk show appearance as a platform for grievance rather than genuine exchange. As the studio lights finally dimmed that night, as the crew packed up equipment and the band members put away their instruments, there was a collective sense of having witnessed something unusual. Not something to be proud of, exactly, but something significant. A moment where professionalism had met entitlement, where patience had met hostility, where grace had met aggression. And in that moment, in that clash, it had become very clear who was who. The next morning, Seth would arrive at work ready to do another show. The incident would become a story, then an anecdote, then eventually just a footnote in the show's long history. But for everyone who was there, everyone who watched it happen in real time, it remained vivid. The moment when a routine interview became anything but routine, when politeness gave way to confrontation, and when one person's inability to engage respectfully brought an interview to an abrupt and uncomfortable end. The lesson, if there was one, seemed simple. Respect is a two-way street, and when one person refuses to travel it, the conversation can only end one way, with an empty chair and a studio full of people shaking their heads, and a host who handled it all with more grace than most people could have mustered.